Jeff Kabush here, and it's time for some tire talk. Unbound is coming up. Not racing this year, but been getting a lot of questions about tire setup. Thought I'd just put all my tips together in one video for you. So I've got a pile of Maxxis tires here. They all look very similar, but it's the subtle differences that can really make a difference out on the track. Gets pretty confusing. TPI, construction, tread, pressure, wheel setup. So let's go over some of the basics. So with Maxxis, there's actually 3 different tire constructions, which is the most important thing in Kansas. The first one, and the one I'd use for most races, is the EXO construction. It's a 120 TPI tire. That's threads per inch. Think of it kind of like sheets on your bed. The higher the thread count, the more supple and comfortable. Lighter and faster on the road. Downside, a little less durable. And the EXO means that there's just an extra layer of protection in the sidewall, not throughout under the tread. So in my opinion, unless you're going to roll the dice in Kansas, I'd probably rule out the 120 TPI. The next step up in the Maxxis range is the Silk Shield construction. So that's 60 TPI. It's not only protection in the sidewall, it goes bead to bead, so you get that extra protection layer underneath the tread. The final gravel construction, which is really only offered in the refuse, is the Max Shield. Now the Max Shield not only has the bead-to-bead silk sheet protection, but also has an extra layer underneath the tread. So it's incredibly tough, but it also makes it pretty stiff. You can pretty much ride these things until they're square. So people tend to stress a lot about picking the right tread pattern, but to me the most important thing is getting that construction right and then the tire pressure. So you're going to want to play around a bit with pressure, and that's one thing to take into note when you change constructions from the EXO to the Silk Shield to the Max Shield. The tire is getting stiffer and stiffer, so you want to adjust the pressure lower as the construction gets stiffer to get the same feel on the road. Always start my ride with a tire pressure gauge. Check that pressure so you can correlate it with a feel and kind of dial it in for your personal preferences. One of the biggest things in Kansas is comfort on the road. After 200 miles, your hands are numb, your feet are numb, so you don't want to be running that super hard pressure or you're really going to be feeling it at the end of the day. You might think out in Kansas, you don't want a flat, so you're going to run your tire really hard. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's not always the best decision. The more air pressure, the more tension there is in the sidewall, easier it is for those sharp rocks to cut. After the construction and getting your tire pressure right, of course you got to look at the tread. There are some super fast options like the Receptor or the Velocita. One other thing to think about in Kansas especially, it's not so much pinch flat, there's really sharp rocks. So some of the fast tires, they don't have a lot of rubber coverage on top of the treads. So I'd tend to recommend something with some knobs. Like the Maxxis Rambler has a bit of rubber, and that's going to keep the sharp flint rocks from slashing across the tread and puncturing, as I've definitely seen out in Kansas. So the tire pressure is super important to get dialed in, not too hard, not too soft. And one option, which I'm a huge advocate in a partner with Cushcore, is using tire inserts. So there's 2 really big benefits to running a tire insert. One is lower pressure. I've dropped from mid-30s with a 40C tire down to the low to mid-20s. So you're going to get not only a lot of comfort on the road from the lower pressure, there's also the damping qualities of tire insert, which is really going to be comfortable on the rough roads in Kansas. It's definitely been a bit of a game changer on the gravel side. If you haven't seen it, that's what the Cushcore looks like. Thin foam insert, so it protects against rimming out, but it also provides some damping on the wheel. Adds about 110 grams of wheel, but in my opinion, well worth it, especially in a place like Kansas. So those are the kind of the key things to take into account. Look at the construction, the TPI, the protection layers, dial in your pressure. So I said I'm not doing Kansas, but you're probably asking, but what would you run? And I gotta say, Kansas is pretty diabolical. Crazy sharp rocks, crazy long day. For sure, I'd be ruling out the EXO tires. Durability is number 1. So I think I'd go with the Rambler. In the Silk Shield, for sure, with the Cushcore. I think the big advantage with the Cushcore is obviously the comfort, but also reducing the chances of slashing the sidewall. If you don't want to bother with inserts and are pretty confident in your bike control, I think the refuse with that super tough max shield construction is actually a good option. The refuse is going to be super stiff, but you can definitely drop the pressure down to the low 30s without an insert. And if you want to run an insert too, man, you could run it really comfortable in the low 20 psi. So running that Silk Shield 40C Rambler with the Cush core, I'd probably be starting 22, 23 psi. Another thing to take into account, the temps rise, your tires are going to definitely stiffen up. You might even want to stop in the pits and drop a couple psi if you have a pressure gauge. I'd tend to go with the 40C Rambler, but if you have the tire clearance, you can definitely run the 45. Bigger tire, you can drop the psi a bit with that higher volume and get even more comfort. At the end of the day, pick what you feel comfortable with. Be as prepared as you can, but make sure you got those tire plugs. You practiced, you know how to use them. Take care of that nutrition. Freeze those bottles if it's hot out there. Hope you all have fun, and we'll see you at the races.